Wolfpack Nation. Thank you all so much again for tuning back in as we got an exciting episode today. We got a former NC State football player, and I think for me personally, I mean, I think it's a NC State football legend. You know, I mean, he was just a guy that for 4 years in a row, you knew exactly where he was at any point on the football field. And so Brandon Bishop, former NC State safety from 2009 to 2012. So, Brandon, thank you so much for joining us, my friend.
Yeah, guys, I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, but before we get into it, though, please make sure, again, if you haven't already, make sure to hit that subscribe button. It really helps support us in the channel. Give this video a like, check out all of our great NC State content, and give us a follow at Tuffy Talk Now on Twitter or Instagram. So, Brandon, first of all, one thing that, again, we always love to do with every single interview, and for those who have watched a lot of our interviews before, know exactly what this question is going to be. But, you know, we always like to kind of give our followers kind of our listeners a little bit of kind of an update of, you know, what you're up to these days, you know, kind of what's going on in the life of Brandon Bishop these days.
Yeah, that's a great way to start. So I've become a North Carolinian. Raleigh is now my permanent home. I'm here, live kind of a stone's throw from the stadium, right next to the fairgrounds, and married. We have a 2-year-old now, so learning how to be a dad, wow. Selling some software, and rooting on the Wolfpack, just like all you guys.
Mm-hmm. Man, how'd you score a house right beside the fairgrounds? That's some requested real estate for sure.
Yeah, my neighbors are parking like 50 and 60 cars in their backyards, wow. And it's chaos during fair season, but it's fun during football season, being able to walk over to the games and tailgate in your own driveway. There's some perks away from
that would be awesome.
After graduating, just life in general, not playing football. How's that been for you?
Man, I think anyone that plays college football, or any sort of high level of football knows that, you know, when the game's over, there's a little bit of a transition period. And, you know, if you were playing guitar since you were 5 years old, and then all of a sudden at 25, they told you couldn't play it anymore. It's challenging. And I've had my fair share of challenges with it, but, I fortunate enough to play in a lot of football games, start a lot of games for the Wolfpack. And so, I've kind of closed that chapter and on to, other things, being a dad, being a businessman, and, doing well. But it's definitely an adjustment. And a lot of guys kind of get hung up on, dreams that didn't quite, materialize or didn't go as, they had planned or hoped.
You mentioned
and so
playing guitar.
it's a transition for anyone that's
totally
done something for that long.
Yeah. Or I can at least imagine it, put it that way.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, it's kind of wild. It's like one of the few things in life, like, you pick up a golf club and you can play that, until you can't really walk or swing a club anymore. And even like basketball, like, I see like Scott Wood and some of those guys that I used to know and hang out with that are NC State hoopers, and some of them aren't playing anymore, but you can still go to the gym and like get shots up, or you can still go play in an open run or a men's league, but
play flag really football and just lay out a guy
for football. So it's definitely a transition. Some guys, not for me, but I'm a huge football fan, so I like watching it. And some guys, they stop playing and they can't really be around it anymore. But
so then, if you're a big NFL fan, who's your team? So, are they doing well?
I love it, and still watch a ton of football. So it's weird. I grew up I'm a South Florida guy. I grew up near Miami, so Dolphins fan growing up for years and years, going to the old Pro Player Joe Robbie Stadium, but got a little bit of taste of the NFL and spent the most time up in Minnesota. So I still kind of pull for them. Adam Thielen is a buddy of mine. We were practice squad rookies the same year. Harrison Smith is still there. He was a teammate of mine. So I'm more of just like, casually observing got Red Zone on for 8 hours on Sunday and kind of seeing what the whole slate and board's doing. But if there is one team, I guess it would be the Vikings.
Cool. Well, and one thing too, you mentioned Harrison Smith, and actually one thing I was actually going to bring up at some point in the interview, but since you mentioned him, I guess I'll go ahead and bring it up. But it's kind of funny, looking back, and obviously you first got signed on to the practice squad with the Vikings, and I mean, I truly do think, like, looking at Harrison Smith and looking at, like, for example, his like both of your pro day performances, I mean, they're pretty much exactly the same. I mean, you guys both ran, mid 4.5, like 4.55 40s, give or take. I mean, even like watching his game compared to, yours when you were at State, very, very similar. Where, I mean, I think you were, and at least this is how I would classify you, as kind of like an all around safety, and like not necessarily like the biggest hitter per se, but I mean, like, you would do it all, and I think Harrison Smith is kind of in that same ballpark as well, at least from my understanding. So, I mean, would you kind of agree that you kind of see some similarities between your game when you're
comparing him to Harrison Smith?
Harrison's?
Yeah,
Leighton, you might be my new best friend, man. That's some high praise. I mean, that dude's a perennial Pro Bowler, probably going to be a Hall of Famer.
Yeah.
Let's be fair then, Brandon. You're not that good.
I'm just saying that the game style is very similar. I mean,
you weren't as good as him. Yeah, that's what he's saying.
If me and Harrison were that comparable, I'd probably still have logged a couple more credited seasons. But no, I appreciate that, and I guess I kind of get what you're saying. He's not like the biggest dude, the fastest dude. He's got a knack for the ball, and he's just kind of one of those guys that is always in the right spot and, has a nose for the football. So, I can tell you, practicing with him for 2 years, I am definitely not quite the athlete or football player that he is. But, he's a first round pick that, has carved out truly kind of, I think, probably a Hall of Fame career. So it's interesting. We had the same, so John Tenuta, he was kind of our de facto defensive coordinator, linebackers coach my last 3 years. And he coached Harrison at Notre Dame too. And so he used to tell me a lot about him, and we ran a lot of the same sort of fire zone schemes. And so he'd tell me kind of what Harry would do when he was playing certain spots in the defense before I ever knew him. So it was interesting to kind of hear a lot of that perspective about how he was as a player. And really, he played a lot of like kind of in the box sort of linebacker in college, and then see, how much of a kind of true all around safety he's become in the league. But I appreciate the comparison there.
Yeah, no, well, again, I mean, at the end of the day, first of all, I mean, for you to be a 4-year, starter for NC State, I mean, especially with the defenses that State had during that time, highlighted, by the 2010 defense, I mean, you have to be doing something right. That's all I'm saying, to be a part of that defense for 4 years. So that's all I'm saying, so, and then kind of taking a step back to, talking a little bit more. So, so what was your overall experience like? I know that, you played, you were with the practice squad with the Falcons, the Eagles, and the Vikings. And so, definitely jumping around a little bit from, the central, up north, and then to, southeast in Atlanta, then, up northeast for Philadelphia. So, I mean, what was that overall experience like? And I mean, was there anything that you learned from that experience that you even apply in today's life?
Yeah. So, I mean, like, I bounced around, was in and out, but spent like, parts of 3 seasons in the NFL with those organizations. And obviously, like, a dream come true as a kid. You grow up kind of, watching on TV, just dreaming of one day kind of wearing a jersey, running through the tunnel, doing all that stuff. So it was cool to get a taste of it. I'd obviously like to still be playing, pro football instead of selling software. But
sure.
What I really learned is that, you have those guys that are the Harrison Smiths, the truly like kind of elite top 4 or 5 percenters in the league. And then you've got a bunch of guys that are all really comparable, are, obviously talented, obviously high IQ and high football IQ. And, there's just so many of those dudes that are good football players. And then it just comes down to fit and scheme, and if you're in the right place at the right time. And, you know, in the same way that it worked out real well for me at NC State, you know, started early, became a 4-year starter, became an all-conference player. Like, it couldn't have really drawn it up any better. It just didn't fall that way for me in the NFL. And I don't think it was because I wasn't like, I think I was good enough, and there were plenty of guys that are comparable. But there's just so many of those guys in the league that are good football players, but it's really about finding a coaching staff that's, you know, kind of on their way up, building something, and then finding a scheme that you can fit into and really carve out a niche for yourself. So, I mean, it was a great experience. Played for 3 organizations that were very different. 5 head coaches in that short time. So yeah, it was a great experience.
Great. Before we continue, I want to take a quick second to tell you about our sponsor, Flatlands Jessup Insurance Group, that has your whole world covered, with agents in 5 offices throughout Eastern North Carolina to help you decide how much coverage you need, offering policies for home and auto, recreational vehicles, commercial, crop, health, life, and employee benefits. They are able to combine options to find a comprehensive solution that works for you. Flatlands Jessup protects the things you love so you can spend less time worrying and more time enjoying them. Find them on Facebook and Instagram at Flatlands Jessup. You can also visit their webpage at www.flatlandsjessup.com. So please make sure to go and check them out. And one thing too, I wanted to kind of get your confirmation on, because I've always heard this story, because you know, Brandon, I was actually a football equipment manager from 2013 to 2017, and so during that time, Jimmy Sutton, who was a former cornerback at State, he was jumping around between strength and conditioning, I think a little bit of graduate assistant, stuff like that, jumping around a little bit in the football program. And so I would talk to him from time to time. And one of the things he always told me, at least a story he always told me, is how you and him are both from the same area. And he basically not necessarily took a credit for basically discovering you, but basically saying that that he basically approached the coaching staff with your tape and said, guys, you need to check out this guy, and you're going to like what you see. And basically, and he said basically the rest is history, that the coach watched tape and was hooked on you since, and got you to come to NC State. So, I mean, from where you're sitting, would you say that Jimmy had something if not a lot to do with that, or do you think that you know it was going to happen either way, kind of deal?
No, absolutely. Jimmy Sutton is a huge reason why I ended up at NC State. So, two things on Jimmy. One, first, Jimmy Sutton, just a great dude, awesome cat,
yes.
And was a heck of a football player in his own right. And so the story is, first I got one kind of story on that, and then I've got a second Jimmy Sutton story for you that you may have never heard, and maybe no Wolfpack fans have ever heard.
Okay.
So the first thing, Jimmy was obviously a cornerback here at State, highly touted recruit, came in, kind of went through the staff change, was one of those guys that was an Amato guy that, you know, was kind of in his last year with O'Brien and the new staff. And so when Jimmy was done playing, he was back. We both are from Boca Raton, Florida. Both went to Boca High. And so Jimmy was coaching the defensive backs my senior season. So Jimmy was my coach my last year in high school. And he, I mean, absolutely, you know, is the one that gets all the credit. He took I had a highlight tape of my first, I wasn't a very highly recruited junior player. So you know, a lot of those guys, that was when Rivals and Scout were really starting to take off, and 24/7 wasn't even a thing yet. So guys were having massive offer lists, dozens of offers before they even started their senior season. And I wasn't one of those guys. So I really needed to have a good senior year in order to kind of I think I had 2 scholarship offers or something. So after the first month, you know, I was off to a great start. Our team was playing well. And I made a little highlight tape of 4 games, and Jimmy got that to Coach Archer and to Coach Reed and to the staff. And yeah, I mean, they came down and offered me a scholarship. Sometime I think in October or November. And yeah, Jimmy's absolutely the reason, or one of the main reasons why I ended up at NC State.
So Was there anywhere else you almost went, or was it your?
Yeah, so I ended up with probably like 15 or so offers, and like it's funny because I went on like as a junior going into my senior year. Like I told you, I wasn't really that highly recruited, but I went on kind of this like self-recruiting tour where I was like visiting schools and like, hey, I'm Brandon. Like,
I play football.
Like check out my tape. Like, I'd love to come play for you. And I did a tour of. I went to Wake Forest. I went to Vandy. I went to Carolina, and I went to Virginia. And I think I went to Duke too. And the only one I didn't visit, and I don't know why, because we were right here, was State. And so like I went to all these schools, like basically begging them to recruit me after my junior season, like that spring. And they were all like, no. But sure enough, once Jimmy got the tape to the coaches up here, I got the scholarship offer from State, and actually had another high school coach. He coached receivers, Corey Ivy, that was a receiver at West Virginia. And he did the same thing with the West Virginia coaches. And so NC State and West Virginia actually offered me on the same day. I'll never forget that. And then once two schools like that put their stamp on you, then the rest of the offers start coming in. But those are actually the only two schools I ended up taking a recruiting visit to or an official visit to. And just had a great visit here. Came over Thanksgiving. We played Miami. Beat Miami at home. It was awesome. Grew up, obviously South Florida kid. My grandpa went to UM. So like that was an awesome thing to see. Whereas like on my visit to West Virginia, I'm in Morgantown. Like they're playing South Florida. It is like 25 degrees in a blizzard.
It's not for me.
And like there's inches of snow. I'm just like, this place isn't for me.
Did West Virginia or South Florida win that game?
So that was kind of the Brandon Bishop recruiting. You know what? I think it had to be West Virginia, because I remember we went out after the game, and you guys remember Pat White?
Yeah, I was gonna say
quarterback. And he went out. They like rented out some big club in Morgantown, and like you would have thought this dude was like, the governor of West Virginia. It was insane. But anyway, Jimmy Sutton's story before we move on.
Yes, I was going to bring it back up.
Jimmy Sutton, I don't know if you guys know, but he was like a 4-star, I think 5-star on some other services. Like he was a very highly recruited,
like number six overall athlete in the country. Like top 200 national recruit.
Got to be like one of the higher recruits that State's ever landed. But for a long time, Jimmy was supposed to go to Texas. And at the time, Mac Brown was a coach at Texas. And so the story goes, Mac Brown, he had gotten the commitment from Jimmy Sutton. He came down to visit the high school. But thought the recruiting was done. Jimmy had committed. It was over. Mac Brown sits down in coach's office, puts his boots on the desk, leans back in the chair, and Jimmy says, "Yeah, I'm not going." And Mac Brown spit out his drink. But Jimmy Sutton decommitted from Texas. Told Mac, "I'm going."
So we'll need to have at least one fan in the stadium that says
Chuck the
Jimmy Sutton says hi to Mac Brown or something.
I always got a kick out of that.
Sutton says hi. Funny. He probably won't even care, but he might even remember. He's old enough now.
Exactly.
Yeah.
No.
He'd be like, "Who's that? Who's?"
Yeah, that's okay. But one thing too, though, Brandon, I mean, I did want to bring up, obviously one play that sticks out to me from your time. I mean, there's a lot of plays that really stick out, to me during your time at State, but the one that stands out to me the most is the Champ Sports Bowl when we were playing West Virginia, now that you're saying this, how ironic is it that we played West Virginia in probably one of the biggest bowl games that state's played in a long time. So, but you had that ridiculous sick catch, basically jump. I mean, it looked like a clear touchdown. All of a sudden, there's the camera and there's a wide receiver by himself. All of a sudden, out of like left field, you just come jumping over and just snag it. And Nate Irving comes over, or Terrell, I can't remember who it was, just celebrating, jumping up and down. And that was ridiculous. But I mean, looking back at that game, but then also even the year after, where you guys played Geno Smith and then Teddy Bridgewater. I mean, at the time it wasn't really understood, but now looking back at it now, you're like, wow, like those were two really good teams. That state beat back to back with two quarterbacks that aren't necessarily Hall of Famers, but I mean, they've established themselves in the NFL and still are in the NFL to this day. So
yeah,
you kind of hang your hat on that a little bit.
I mean, I cherish every one of those passes that I ended up catching that wasn't intended for me. I love them. I love them all equally. Yeah. But that was a special game and a cool week. West Virginia talks so much smack all week long. When you go to these bowl games, I don't know how they're doing them now with, like COVID and all that. But like typically, there's like a bunch of these outings during the week where like you get the teams together and they're kind of around each other. And like, usually it's kind of like, kind of lighthearted, kind of back and forth, trash talk. But like these dudes were just so lame. And it was just like, they were just nonstop, like just talking trash all week. And it wasn't even like, it was just lame stuff. So anyway, we were fired up. We wanted to really hand it to them. And, we ended up beating them pretty good. And at that time, Geno was already kind of like, Geno was a big deal. Tavon Austin, some of these dudes, like they had some real weapons. And so that was a great win. And, we ended up playing a young Teddy Bridgewater the next year in what was then called the Belk Bowl, what's now maybe like Duke Mayo, or it's probably
Mayo
got
Bowl.
Like three other names by now. But people didn't really know a ton about Teddy at that point, because I think he was maybe a sophomore or something. But I mean, I was around Teddy briefly in Minnesota. My second year, They drafted him as a first round pick, and so got to know him a little bit. And both those guys have carved out nice careers. I mean, I think Teddy's a really good quarterback, and obviously he had that kind of catastrophic knee injury that derailed a lot of his early development and momentum. But I think, both those guys have hung around the league for almost a decade or more now. So you got to kind of tip your cap to that.
For sure. So with that being said, we're going to have to wrap it up right here as we ran out of time for part 1. But make sure to tune in for part 2 as we continue this conversation and start talking a little bit more about the current football team, and talk a little bit more about Brandon's time in NC State as well. So please make sure, again, as a reminder, hit that subscribe button, give us a like, check out all of our great NC State content, give us a follow, Tuffy Talk Now on Twitter and Instagram. But thank you all so much for tuning in, and we'll see you for part 2. As always, go Pack, y'all.